I want to talk about something here people not talking about, and I'm kind of wondering why nobody's talking about it, because it is really a big error, and we are getting these errors because we are not asking very important questions first. And before asking those questions, we need to know what effect these new numbers Azimio discovered. They are saying there were 140,028 votes which were not tallied. So will those numbers affect the presidential valid votes and their percentages? And that when you get it into 50 plus 1 to be declared a winner. So nobody's talking about this one, and I looked at it from a different angle, and I saw we could go and see what is happening. So before we go to those new figures as we are bringing up, first of all, let us IEBC some few important questions. Probably that is where we are getting it wrong. When we get those questions out of the way, then we will be able to do calculations in a good way using the verified figures. So IEBC, what is your figures as the total registered voters in the country? So IEBC said the registered voters were 22,120,458, representing 100%. Also, IEBC said the total turnout of the people who voted was 14,434,232, which represents 65.25286231, which represents 65. So when you do the percentages before rounding off, this is the value you find out the figures, and when you round it off, this is the figures you have. So when we want to do with the whole numbers without the decimals, so we see we do the rounding off. So 2 is not greater than 5, so it cannot round 5. So the percentage here is 65 with whole numbers without doing the decimals. So IEBC also said the total valid counted votes, these are the votes minus, these are the clean votes which were counted in favor of all these candidates. So for you to get these valid counted votes, you add Ruto's votes plus Raila's votes plus Maure's votes plus Wajakoya's votes, you get the total numbers. So if we can do that in a speedy way, so Ruto plus Raila plus Maure plus Wajakoya, so we found the answer 14,213,027 valid votes. These are here, so which represents the percentage before rounding off 64.25286041, which represents 64% after rounding off. So when we round off, actually 2 is not higher than 5, so it cannot round off 4, so 64%. So we are remaining with one question to ask IEBC: what was the total number of the spoiled vote? So IEBC said the total spoiled votes were 221,205. When you round off, when you do the percentages before rounding off, this is the figure you find, 1.000001899. After rounding off, you find this 1%. So when we round off, 0 cannot round off 1 to any figure. So up to this point, IEBC has answered our questions. So what means if the total turnout was 65%. So it means valid votes plus spoiled votes, you get the total number of the turnout. Let's add this: valid votes, spoiled vote, total turnout 14,434,232 as this one. And now we ask again IEBC what so when we found this one, also we want to see the percentage if it comes the same. So the percentage before rounding off of the total turnout plus the spoiled vote, we find 65.25286231, the same as this one. If we want to see the percentages after rounding off, we will round out to 60%. So 64 plus 1%, 65%. So up to this point, IEBC has answered our questions. So we have the total numbers and the valid figures verified by the IEBC. Now, Azimio, they are saying they have new figures, their own figures apart from the IEBC, because there are some figures that are agreeing with IEBC, and there are some figures that are not agreeing with IEBC, like of those untallied votes. So when we asked the Azimio what was your figures, so Azimio said the total registered voters according to IEBC, also Azimio said is 22,120,458, which represents 100% according to the IEBC. Azimio also agreed to that. Azimio also said the total valid counted votes were 14,213,027 votes, which represents 64.25286041, which represents 64% after rounding off. So which means Azimio, they are saying all the total numbers of the candidates were this, which they have provided here. And now Azimio also said in top of this one, IEBC never included the untallied votes of 140,028. So when Azimio said IEBC never included this one, so Azimio means, so when you do valid votes plus the untallied votes, so the figures would be different, and it would be affecting the computation rounding off, before rounding off or after rounding off. So it will affect the total number of the votes down here. So it means it will come from here, from the total valid numbers, to get now the total valid numbers according to Azimio, plus the total valid numbers of IEBC, plus the untallied votes of 140,028. So Azimio, they are saying the total valid counted votes were 14,353,055. Let's see how they came to that. So Azimio said to them, this is valid votes according to IEBC, this one. Azimio are saying total valid votes is 14,353 and 55. Azimio are here by saying if you add the valid numbers of IEBC, which they confirmed, and the numbers of untallied votes which IEBC did not tally, if you add them, they will bring you to this number. So this number, valid votes according to IEBC, it was 64%. Untallied vote, according to Azimio, when you find its percentage before rounding off, this number, when you round off, it's 0.63. And when you add the valid votes of IEBC plus the untallied vote, this is the new number. Azimio, they are saying IEBC should be using this number, not this one. Should be adding untallied votes here. let's see how this calculation is gonna escalate. So Azimio here are telling us the valid votes which were counted before, these are the counted votes before removing the spoiled vote. I mean after removing the spoiled vote is 64.88588527. When you round it off, it becomes 65%. You see now here the question we will ask Azimio here. You see now Azimio, they are in a net, and I don't know how they will get out, because if they added untallied votes plus valid votes from IEBC, it brought up to this number. So this number, when you calculate the percentage, it gives you 65%. That means, that means the valid counted vote according to Azimio 65%, and the IEBC told us, or everybody knows, the total turnout of people was 65. But Azimio here, they are telling us now the turnout is 65. Very interesting. And again, Azimio also said spoiled vote is 221,205, which represents this number 1% as IEBC. Spoiled vote is the same as Azimio is saying. So Azimio basically they are saying verified valid numbers by IEBC plus the number they are saying 128 untallied vote, when you add them, they give you the total number. When you add the total valid number now plus the spoiled vote, now you get the total turnout. Now IEBC they are saying the total turnout is 14,574,260, but IEBC said the total turnout was 14,434,232, which represents 65. Now see Azimio, when we do the calculation for Azimio, let's see what will happen next. Azimio, when you do now the calculation for the percentage of this number here, Azimio they are coming with 65.88588717, 66% when you round off. But remember, IEBC said the total turnout was 65%. See Azimio, they are coming with their total turnout 66%. You see, they are exceeding with 1%. Hello, Azimio, they went into the net, and now they are quiet. Okay, without further question to question Azimio, we wanted to assume and do some calculations with these values which they are giving us, so that we break the doubt off, because IEBC gave us this breakdown, and we have, when we rounded it off, we found there was an error of 0.01. And now when we are doing with Azimio here, we want to use the Azimio numbers to do the calculations and see what is happening. So what is happening here? This is the whole breakdown of what happened. According to IEBC, we are good. According to Azimio, we have seen it. And now the summary of the Azimio figure, as I said, is the total figures of IEBC, the number which were valid votes, plus the untallied votes, plus the spoiled vote. You get the total number turnout, which is 66%. So how did 140,028 28 votes affected the threshold of each candidate, which Azimio are claiming nobody got 50 plus 1% to be declared a winner? So actually, when you see here, Ruto's current votes plus Raira's current vote plus Maure's current votes and Wataka's current votes plus untallied votes, you get 14 1,353 and 55 votes according to Azimio. Now I want you to open your eyes wide and see where Azimio are lying to us. You see what Azimio are lying to us? They are including Untallied votes here as a candidate. You see, the Untallied votes, of course, when you get them out, you see the total number of valid votes according to IEBC. This is the correct number. But when you add the Untallied vote, the claims of Azimio, good, the number changes. But Azimio, they are so interested of this number changing, and we use the valid votes over this number times 100 to affect the percentages. You see, what Azimio are not are fooling us here is that, you know, 140,028 votes, these are the votes need to be split among this guy. You have to split this vote. These are the valid votes for each guys. So Untallied vote has affected the total valid votes each candidate get if you add them. But Untallied vote is not a candidate. So these are the votes each guys should get. So Azimio has added it here. Now we are using Ruto's number, current votes, divided by this number times 100, we get this number, which showing Ruto did not get 50 plus 1. But it's a lie. The total number has been affected by 140,028, but these votes has not affected each candidate. For you to get the effect here, this number should be affected first. These numbers, you see 140,000, these are votes. And what Azimio are not telling us, how many votes each candidate received from this, how much votes each candidate gained. You have to gain from here, each of the candidate. Bear in mind, 140 and 28 are votes which they are claiming which were untallied. These votes are not for one candidate. These are the votes for favor of each candidate. So why Azimio are not coming up with the number to say, example, a spoiled vote were this number, Ruto got these figures, Raila got these figures, Maure got these figures, and Wajakoya got these figures. But they are including it here so that we can do the calculation here. So we see, oh yes, nobody got 50 plus 1. But actually, the total number of the valid vote has changed, but it has not affected the candidates. Do you see now the trick Azimio are using here? So when you affect the total number, you cannot affect the computation or the percentage from this number before they are affected. So this number should be split among the candidates so that you can use this number to divide by them and do the math to find the correct percentages. You see, now Azimio are claiming that when you add the numbers before rounding off, you get 100%. When you get them, when you do them after rounding off, you get 100%. So Azimio are beating their chest that they didn't find, after rounding off, they didn't find the error of 100. Why? Because Azimio here, they are including Untallied vote as a candidate. But this vote for sure should be split among these guys. And you see, even though you see here, when we rounded it off, Ruto is 50%, so it's missing only with 1% to be a candidate. And now you hear Azimio people saying that Kenya Kwanza stole their votes. So, okay, with even their intentional error, here, which are using to fool people, probably I don't know if they're gonna use these figures in court. If we test their figures, it shows Ruto still is leading them. So what votes were stolen? And even though they say Ruto did not get, or nobody got 50 plus 1% to be a winner. And how comes they are saying that Odinga should be declared a winner, and still is down here. So what I did, I also did an error intentionally on this side, because Azimio are not telling us how many votes each candidate got from here. So I decided, because it's Raila who's making noise, I decided to add him all votes. So this is his current votes. I added him all the votes, 128 votes. Remember, of these untallied votes they are claiming, remember we have spoiled vote in there too, but they are not talking of that one. And they are not saying how many votes each candidate got here. They are not saying how many spoiled votes we have here, but they are coming up with the figure. That's fine. So to get this crap off, I said, let me add Odinga all the votes, because it's the one who's complaining, and he came under Ruto with 7,082,958,000. So when untallied votes was split to all, were split just for Odinga, or were given to Odinga, this is what the percentages were. So we used now this number to calculate here, and we found the correct answers. And if this 140,028 votes, there were no spoiled votes, and there were only for Raila Odinga, then their claim is genuine. But can you tell me, of 140,000 of untallied votes were only for one candidate? High chances no. So even though when I added him all votes, still Odinga is 49.35, still Ruto is reading here. Bear in mind, we are making the big error because I literally added him all the votes, but he did not get even over Ruto. So he also claims the votes were stolen. Ruto is not leading over a million votes here, and the politicians from Azimio side, they are saying Chepkat had some secret polling stations which generated a million votes to favor Ruto, while Ruto is not leading over a million. So since in this mathematics error of Azimio, of the intentional one, 140,028 votes, I assumed we don't have spoiled vote, because we want to get this crap out. I said this 140 votes let be split among 4 candidates, because already I gave all of them to Odinga. He did not do anything. It did not affect anything. So I decided all the votes should be given to each candidate here. You see, 140,028 votes. I decided to split them among the 4 candidates, because all these votes were in favor of each candidate. So because I gave Ruto 25,000 votes from 140,000 and this one, and because Raila Odinga is the one who's complaining more, I gave him more share of 100,000 votes, and the rest I split it equally with Wajakoya and Mwaure. Wajakoya and Mwaure, the rest, which were after I gave Ruto 25,000 votes, I gave Raila Odinga 100,000 votes, because he's the one complaining. So I thought it's a good way to pamper him and give him more votes, just in case he doesn't say we gave him less. So I gave him 100,000 votes. Ruto, I gave him 25,000 votes, and the rest I gave them equal votes. So when you added them, when you added this one, it brings you to the same figure, 140,028 votes. So when now I added them here, valid votes, I added each of them 25,000 to Reuters. Now the new figures of each candidate changed here. Now when it changed, now this is now the correct figures, since now this number changed because we added 140,028. It changed to this one. Now when you add these numbers, when we split these numbers, now the effect and affection I was saying, it affected the valid votes of each candidate because they gained from this one. To avoid this thing, Azimio were including here as untallied votes as a candidate. So what I did here, I get rid of the untallied votes here and their percentages. So I split it to each candidate. So Ruto jumped from 1,176,141 to 7,201,141. Odinga jumped from 6,942,930 to 7,042,930. Wajakoya jumped from 31,987 to 39,501. Wajakoya jumped from 61,936 to 69,438. So when I added them all, it brought to this sum. Now when we when we looked for the percentage of these figures of the Azimio figures, including the untallied votes, see what we found here. Before rounding off, when we added all these figures, Azimio got to 100. I mean the first row of before rounding off, computation before rounding off, 100%. So when I rounded off, so when you round off, I don't think one can affect into two decimal numbers, the fewer numbers. So one cannot affect 7, cannot round off 7, I mean. So a number which can round off 7 is a number which is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but one cannot round off 7. So after rounding off, Ruto is 50.17, Raila Odinga 49.06920513. When we rounded off to two decimal numbers, 6 was rounded off by 9, so 0.7, so 49.07. Mwaure got 0.